We are at the beginning of a new era. What does that mean for a new agriculture? Above all, it means learning a lot of new things, following new approaches. Via the prophetic word, for almost 5 decades, the kingdom of God has been giving innumerable indications and help for all areas of life. This also applies to the new agriculture for the new era, an agriculture that is based on respect for the life in the soil, in the plants and animals. In the new agriculture for the new era, it is necessary to observe, to gain experience and to learn from it, aware that all life forms a great unity. Today, field care is the order of the day.
The production of the bread drink is quite simple. You soak these bread remains or this leftover bread in water, and for this purpose we have acquired tanks that we equip with an agitator, and here we mix these bread remains with water.
And after a certain time, the microorganisms start to work in there, and there is a kind of lactic acid fermentation.
We have to help so that a certain temperature is reached, because then these enzymes and bacteria start to work properly. That means about 25 degrees centigrade. And then it is also important, we've experienced this, that the bread drink is stirred repeatedly, otherwise it goes bad. This activity takes about 1 to 2 weeks, and then the bread drink is ready when it is a thick porridge, like sourdough, you could say. And then we dilute this porridge several times, since we have a lot of land to farm, and therefore we also need the bread drink serves to strengthen the fields, to strengthen the soil, primarily the valuable life in the soil.
The soil life is the interaction of all the living beings, that is, for one, the worms, that is, the beetles, the mites, the fungi, the bacteria, and even the tiniest creatures that you cannot see with the eye, together with the whole plant family and the minerals from the soil itself. and all together this makes up the soil life.
In the bread drink, there are mainly lactic acid bacteria that multiply strongly when bread and water are mixed, and these, in turn, help the whole soil life. They strengthen it and help the plant. Be that we always take the soil for granted. We simply walk over the ground, we build roads, we build houses. But when you think about it, we live from these 30 centimeters of valuable, fertile soil. It feeds the people, it feeds the animals, and it is said that it takes about 1,000 years to create 10 centimeters of fertile soil. And this fertile soil is created by the interaction of the stars, the elements, the wind, sun, water, rain, and above all, the life in the soil.
Indeed, we need a good milieu in the soil, and a good milieu develops when all living beings harmonize well together. It's like good digestion that naturally gives us vitality as human beings. And it's exactly the same with the soil life.
The soil life constantly converts dead plant remains, root remains, leaves, foliage, or straw on the grain fields, and along with the rock particles in the soil, turns this into valuable humus. And without humus, there is no fertile soil, because these organic substances, these plant remains, which the earthworms convert with the rock particles, make up only about 6% of the total soil content. And this makes the difference between inanimate, dead soil, rock, so to speak, pure, bare rock, and fertile soil. And that is why the most important thing for us farmers is a healthy soil that is rich in humus and healthy soil organisms.
Our bread drink is very good for the soil because all the bacteria in the soil, all the microorganisms that prepare the nutrients for the plants in the soil need strengthening. And the bread drink has many of these substances that make it possible to create resilience.
Think of the field as a large stomach, so to speak, which these enzymes, the lactic acid bacteria from the bread drink, help to digest everything again.
Through this, the plants become robust and thus can withstand much.
As the bread drink from the grocery store serves the intestinal health of people, this homemade bread drink serves the health of the soil. In traditional agriculture, such a way of strengthening the soil is completely unknown.
The idea for this bread drink was a suggestion from the Spirit of God, and we were privileged to start trying it out, because no one could say how it really works. And as it is, we always start on a small scale, and after a few years we have gained the experience of how we can now implement this on a large scale, and it works.
Above all, the nice thing about the bread drink and all the suggestions that we presently get from the Spirit of God for the new agriculture is that they are always totally simple. And in simplicity, there is ingenuity. Anyone can prepare the bread drink at home. There's nothing to it at all. Of course, there's always a way for us to implement it technically, how we can apply the bread potion not only at home in the watering can for the garden, but also on hundreds of hectares of grain fields, that is, on a large scale. Naturally, we are then always experimenting, but the basic principle is always very simple. And the beauty of it is that it gives us the tools we need for a completely new kind of agriculture, for a completely different way of treating the life in the fields, in nature.
The agriculture that I may now, and I'm privileged to experience, is a completely different kind of agriculture. It is an agriculture that requires the farmer to change his way of thinking and to primarily no longer think in terms of everything for me, but a rethinking that asks, what can I do for the field? What can I do for the soil life? What can I do for the nature kingdoms?
Weil normalerweise, muss man sagen, arbeitet
Because normally we have to say that the modern agricultural industry works against life. The animals lose their habitat. The soil is excessively sprayed with poison, maltreated with artificial fertilizers. The soil is exploited, depleted. Actually, also with the huge machines, agriculture
This is an approach that you won't find in any textbook and that completely disrupts the practice of today's conventional agriculture. Georg knows the methods of conventional farming not only from theory.
Ja, ich bin in der Landwirtschaft aufgewachsen.
Well, I grew up in farming, and as a little boy, I was allowed to go along to the potato field. I was allowed to go along when they were herding cows, and I also had many a playmate in the barn. And when you develop a relationship to an animal as a small personality, they had great joy when someone spent time with them. That was, of course, always a highlight for us children, and also for the animals. They mooed as soon as we went in. When we opened the sliding gate, then it started. So the calf knew. Or we also ran around barefoot in the pigsty. They were happy. These are living beings. They are small personalities. And if you love them as living beings, let's say, and then experience that they are kept only for the sake of it, as it is usual in agriculture, and then they end up in the frying pan at some point, it hurts terribly. And already as a little boy, that made me rethink things a lot, and not to shove everything into my mouth without thinking about it.
Unüberlegt in den Mund zu schieben.
It took many years until I became a real vegetarian, but that was
Why are a bird to be seen? What has actually gone wrong?
today we have huge machines, heavy machines, that work the soil. but at the same time also compact it. Masses of artificial chemical fertilizers and pesticides are spread on the fields, that is, agricultural poisons with which the soil life is ultimately killed and contaminated. In Germany alone, 208 million cubic meters of liquid manure are spread, manure from factory farming, all of which the soil must suffer under.
Wenn man heute Mist und Gülle nimmt,
The manure and slurry of today come from the barns of factory farms.
sind ja oft hunderte,
There are often hundreds, even thousands upon thousands of animals inside that are raised with feed for weight gain, for profit, in the shortest possible time. These animals have feelings. They are also under stress. And this stress of being confined in the animal barns goes into this manure and slurry as information, and this is then spread on the fields. And in addition, this is in such concentrations that the soil life cannot even deal with it.
dass das Bodenleben ja gar nicht umsetzen kann.
Man sagt eigentlich,
It is actually said that the fields are like disposal sites for problem waste. Sewage sludge is driven onto the fields, liquid manure is spread, dung, as well as fermentation substrates from the biogas plants. These are all aggressive and corrosive substances that suffocate the life in the soil. The soils become poorer and poorer, and this can be seen very concretely, for instance, on 1 square meter of fields that have been conventionally farmed for many years with agricultural poisons. There are about 16 to 30 earthworms. On a healthy and vital soil, there are 300 to 400 earthworms on 1 square meter.
And not only the earthworms are missing. The decline in insects, butterflies, beetles, etc., and also small mammals is alarming, especially in agricultural areas. The bread drink and other
Intestinal flora and arable farmland develop similarly, and all these enzymes, yeasts, etc., are active in it.
Well, it is about soil life, and when you take a bit of soil in your hand and look at the soil itself, you will see that it has a different structure. And a different structure also means that the roots can reach into the soil in a completely different way. They can extract the valuable minerals, the valuable substances that they need for their survival in a completely different way. And thus, of course, totally different plants develop that are more vital. And the nutrients in the food, in the grain, for example, also contain many more minerals as well as more ingredients such as protein, etc. So it is a very valuable grain that then develops from it.
One thing about the bread drink is that it fortifies the soil, the valuable soil life, but it is actually about more, because it is also a kind of information. The grains we harvest is milled and baked into bread. And now the bread
years. His conclusion is?
The grain on this farmland is healthy and remains healthy, and for decades we have had practically no problems with diseases. We attribute this partly to these active ingredients in the bread drink. It is like with us human beings. We also need some auxiliary substances so that our body remains healthy and strong. And it is just the same with the fields.
We see here in the background a wheat field. That is now winter wheat. And if one looks here, here are awns. They come out of this soil and grow toward the sky. Then, of course, we also see here chamomile. There are poppies and cornflowers, and the whole thing forms a habitat. We also hear the crickets in the background, so here is a pure living habitat. Hares still find their food here, and deer also find their food here. They like to come to our fields because there is a living space there, and that's how we see it. As humans, we then also find our way back to unity, because life also means life for all. And here, at some point, there will then be good bread for us people.
This field has received the bread drink twice, once in the fall and once in the spring when the grain stalks are still small. Apparently, the fortifying drink has been good for the field.
If you take a look at this field, you can see that there are strong, healthy plants, and there are also beautiful associated plants blooming in it. There's a diversity of insects and species both in and above the soil. And if I were to take a handful of soil, then you would simply see how beautifully fine and crumbly it is. It smells good. It smells healthy, fragrant. And you get that only when you have strengthened the soil in this natural way over the years.
We have experienced that when plants are healthy, they are also stable in their resistance to fungal diseases, or simply diseases in general. The plants are resistant. They are healthy, and they can then withstand fluctuations in the weather much, much more easily.
We notice this above all in the bakery. We have values in the grain that cannot be achieved otherwise with the best qualities of grain. And normally, we have always worried that we don't fertilize now as is normal, then not much will come from it, and the baking quality will be poor. But meanwhile, we have found out that this is not true. The soils are healthy, and the plants are getting stronger and stronger, and we get the best baking results from our grain. And this, after so many years of cultivation, without manure, without slurry, without artificial fertilizers, without sprays. So we produce this bread drink in really large quantities, but it is not only good for the fields, we ourselves can drink it as well. And the proof is on or in the hand, for the benefit of all. Wonderfully refreshing and healthy, of course, for us and for the fields.
Liebe Tier- und Naturfreunde,
Dear friends of animals and nature, insects are small, some are tiny, but they have a great significance for life on Earth. God's creation is a mighty symbiosis in which the various species of animals and plants help one another. For example, bees and bumblebees pollinate trees, bushes, and flowers, thus ensuring the continuation of many species. During recent years, particularly through industrialized agriculture, which spreads tons of poison on the fields and creates huge monocultures, a massive dying of species has begun. There are up to 80% fewer insects than there were 25 years ago. Due to the lack of insects, many wild plants are no longer pollinated and thus no longer form seeds. These seeds are also lacking for many bird species, which are also decreasing more and more. If you care about nature, then help it by helping the insects. For example, with a mixture of seeds for blossoming plants that can be sown in the garden or on the balcony. It not only looks nice, but it helps the insects from spring till fall. Wild bees and many nature helpers. It is very easy, for instance, when you take a piece of hardwood and drill holes in it of varying diameters between 2 and 8 millimeters in which the wild bees can lay their eggs. Then there are various models with a roof which can be built in the form of a little house or a pail as we have used here. And under the roof, under the weather protection, we stick in reeds or canes. Here we now have a combination